Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township in the heart of College Town. Ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and it's a very happy, well, as happy as you can make a day like this, September the 4th, to you and yours. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com. Drew Hickens on the other side of the glass. How are you, sir?
Like you said, as good as you can be doing.
Yeah,
you know?
well, I'll say this. If you're going to have a day like today, you may as well have a show like this. Head coach of the Florida State Seminoles, Jimbo Fisher, is going to join our own Gene Williams in the next segment. Our own Michael Langston is going to join us. Now, during the middle of the season, why would Michael Langston be joining us? It's not like there's a ton of recruiting going on. It's almost like Florida State's going to depend on a quarterback for the rest of the season. The only really recruiting guys would know what he looks like on a field. I'm, of course, talking about Justin Blackman. I know I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this about 10 times this show because I did it all camp. I do it just about every time I talk about the guy, James Blackman, who is more than likely going to be the starting quarterback for the Florida State Seminoles from here on out throughout that way. If you're listening to this show, I'm assuming you know the story, but in case you haven't, spoiler alert, Florida State lost to Alabama 24-7 and lost their starting quarterback along the way. We're going to get into all that, a nice meaty segment here to start this show. But before we do, thanks so much for waking up with us here at 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio, or, of course, the TuneIn Radio app and our own WTSM app streaming on your mobile devices and online. iTunes, Podcast Republic, warchantradio.com, however it is you listen to the podcast, we thank you so much for that. We met a lot of podcast listeners on a Friday night at that pregame party that Atlanta had down at the Georgia Freight Depot. Great time. And it's always so cool to hear how many people will listen to us from so many different places. I had a gentleman come up to us from North Atlanta, say he never misses a show. We literally had folks from Los Angeles come up to us, the complete other coast. And that is why I say coast to Atlantic coast, because, and I know this is such a terrible Twitter cliche, but Null Nation's everywhere. Florida State fans are everywhere, and I'm so honored that we get to come in and we get to talk to you every single day. So thank you guys so much for coming up and for the kind words on Friday. It's always appreciated. Of course, radio@warchant.com is your email address. Your Twitter account is @WakeUpWarChant if you like to do it on the social medias. And finally, of course, we can't do this without our friends at For the Table. War Chant Radio is brought to you by our friends at Madison Social, Central, and Township. So I was completely prepared to have another monologue today. I was so prepared to come in, walk in, bounce the ideas off of you, Drew, of this was a team that made a lot of mistakes, had its issues, had its problems, but talent-wise was right there with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Experience-wise seemed to be right there. The offensive line made enough plays for you to win. The defense looked phenomenal, and Jay Graham should be on the hot seat. That was my entire show for today, and we'll get to all of that in a second. But then you lose Deondre Francois. We find out last night it's our friend Wayne McGahee of the Tallahassee Democrat who breaks the story first that it's a patella. He's going to miss the season. And now here you are for the third straight time since the 2014 season. You're going to be going into a season pretty much the entire year with a first-year quarterback. And not just a first-year quarterback, a first-year true freshman quarterback. That has not happened. A start has not happened for a true freshman quarterback at Florida State since the mid-'80s, since 1985, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a long, long time for the Seminoles, and it's been a long time, period, for Jimbo Fisher to have to get his hands on a true freshman quarterback. It's worth noting Jimbo Fisher didn't even start James Winston as a true freshman. I know part of that's because E.J. Manuel was a senior, and he was a very talented guy, but James Winston, easily the best quarterback that Jimbo Fisher's ever had to sit and wait a year and learn the offense. This is not going to be a disaster of a season. For the folks who are ready to say this is going to be a 6-6 year and stuff like that, defense stopped the Alabama Crimson Tide for 3.5 quarters and really had no business, considering how many of those drives started on the wrong side of the 50, had no business keeping Florida State in that game that long. None whatsoever, Drew. But yet, they were. This defense is good enough to get you through some really tough games, and it's good enough to grit you through a lot of games. For the folks who think that James Blackman is going to jump right into this right away and Florida State is still probably going to be a playoff contender and going to just roll with the punches and let it go, that's probably not happening either. I'm not telling you that the world is ending. I'm not telling you that everything's going to be fine. I'm telling you that right now, your expectation should be that almost of one of those late 2000s LSU teams that couldn't score to save their lives. And I'm not saying Florida State's offense is going to be that, because I think you have a very, very talented freshman running back in Cam Akers. I think Jacquez Patrick's going to be a lot more effective against teams that aren't quite as quick as Alabama. And I think you've still got some very, very talented receivers that are going to help out a true freshman quarterback. But I think you've just kind of entered survival mode. Can you still have a decent season with all the great, talented, experienced pieces that are now surrounding a completely unexperienced quarterback?
Right, and I'm glad you said it, because, I'm all for positivity. That's fine. But the truth of the matter is that James Blackman, he is a true freshman. That's never happened in the Jimbo era. Our playbook is about to shrink a ton. I mean, things are going to get simplified to the max. And, at the end of the day, though, there were bright spots to that Bama game. It's hurtful the way things went, but that's what Bama does. They win those ugly games like that, and a lot should be said about our special teams. And trust me, I'm sure we'll beat that to a drum like everybody else. But at the end of the day, the positives you got to take away is look what that D-line did to a really good Alabama offensive line. And we talked about how Alabama had some new pieces and things like that. But, at the end of the day, people don't really typically give Alabama's offensive line any problems, and that front seven really did. I think that defense was as good as advertised. And after a half of football, I thought you really thought to yourself, this Florida State team is for real.
That first half of football, that was sexy. That was really, really sexy football. That was 10-7, a war, a heavyweight bout if you've ever seen one. It was bell to bell, incredible football. Refs kept the hankies in their pockets, let them play, and of course, outside of that kind of PI towards the end of the half, I'd say most folks agreed with that. I think that last call was something that's going to it's still in a lot of folks' minds, but at the end of the day, there's only so much you could talk about there when you've lost your quarterback for the season and things imploded for the special teams unit the way they did. Because here's what Alabama does. Here's why Alabama wins so many games. And you and I were talking off mic when we were trying to set up this show, Drew, and it's so true. Alabama wins games by making you blink and winning the staring contest, because they will continually stare you down and they don't make the mistakes you want them to. They just don't, period. They don't in special teams unless sometimes it comes down to place kicker. And you know what? Alabama did have some place kicker issues in this game because they always seem to. But you know how they remedy that? They remedy that by a screw-up from Keith Gavin. They remedy that from a block punt from Logan Tyler, which Logan Tyler could have the quickest punt release in the world, and it wouldn't have saved him against that. And I'm not excusing Logan Tyler. That was not a great performance. A 12-yard punt shouldn't happen, period, especially after Alabama just gave you a gift of a 9-yard punt. That should not happen at all. But every single bit of special teams, especially at the end when I don't even remember who it was, but Florida State gets the flag for nailing the guy who had already caught the ball, play was dead, that was over. None of that should have happened. And I know I said it very, very briefly on that podcast. What was Jay Graham doing over the summer? And those who've listened to this show, we're starting our third football season of this. I'm not someone who just comes up and rips a coach every day. That's not what we do here. If criticism is warranted, we give criticism. And my God, criticism is warranted for that. I know Jimbo Fisher likes to talk about how much they work on special teams and how much is it. Well, whatever you're doing, that's clearly not working, because over the last 5-6 years, we've talked about it on this show all camp. And I never thought that we would end up devoting a significant part of this segment to this, Drew. Never did I think that coming Monday, I thought we might talk about, well, maybe the punting situation's still not perfect, or, Ricky maybe has some issues, or maybe the returners just aren't right. But Florida State, literally since 2012, has had suspect special teams in more than one area. And the fact that it all imploded on the grandest stage against the grandest opponent that you've played in the Jimbo Fisher era, I think it's only fitting that Florida State has really just kind of not addressed this. and not address that something needs to change, maybe not even in the coach, maybe just how they prepare it, maybe just how they scheme it, maybe just how they draw it up. And the fact that they clearly didn't fix it, I think it's only, I don't want to say right, but it's only fitting that it would blow up in your face in a moment where a team that does not make mistakes much capitalizes on that.
Right. I agree with you totally. And I think for me, what this game really came down to is, yes, the special teams. Yes, you did have the ball inside Alabama's 35-yard line 3 separate times and came away with 0 points, which you just cannot do against Alabama. But at the end of the day, the big difference between these two teams, in my mind, was just strictly discipline. Like you said, Alabama doesn't blink. They sit there, they stare you down, and they wait for you to screw up. And that's exactly what happened. They were just the more disciplined team. They waited for us to make the mistakes that they thought we were going to make, and they capitalized on them like good teams do. That was a dogfight of a football game. The score may not show it. We were outgained by 19 yards. It was a defensive, tough, really good battle, and you made the mistakes that they didn't. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to cost you. And really, more so than this game, you have a sour taste in your mouth about how this game went and this and that, but it's obvious that the biggest part of this game is that you lose Deondre Francois, and it's now, where does your season go from here? Because without Francois, like you said, the expectations of this team have to be rewired quite a bit, because you haven't lost a national title in one night. You didn't lose the national title on week 1 like we were talking about earlier, but you probably lost the only guy who could have gotten you there. And is Francois the best guy on the offense? Maybe or maybe not.
But he's the most important
guy on the offense by far, bar none.
It is, especially with an offense like Jimbo Fisher's that requires the quarterback to do so much and know so much. It's really imperative that you have a guy who knows what you're doing. And that's why you're so curious about Saturday. I could not tell you the last time that you went into an opener like this and you thought to yourself, against Louisiana Monroe, what does this offense look like? And I think no matter what the offense looks like on Saturday, you have to take it with a grain of salt. And that's no offense to ULM, but this is ULM. And I have not done my do homework yet on the Warhawks, but I can tell you this. It will be nothing like the team that you've seen on Saturday, and that defense will be nothing like the team you will see a week from that Saturday against the Miami Hurricanes. But you're putting your trust in the man known as James Blackman. The man the internet knows as Groot.
I am Groot.
I'm so happy we already got that.
I am Groot.
Really happy.
I am Groot.
You're just going to keep doing that, aren't you?
I am Groot.
So you have James Blackman, a quarterback who maybe ran a more open-style system, and you'll hear Michael Langston talk about that a little bit later on when we got a chat with him last night about this. I don't know what to say. I literally don't know what to say, because we've never been here before. And if this wasn't a season where so much was expected of you and so much hype was put into this Florida State team, that's almost a fun proposition. But now, because even if in your brain you have changed the expectations for what the Florida State season is, even if in your brain you've kind of switched to, I will take a year where the defense carries the day, we beat our rivals, and we maybe stub our toe to a team that we shouldn't. Even if you've adjusted your brain to that, the idea that literally for a year you thought the 2017 season is going to be this, and this. I know the playoffs are tough. Maybe we won't beat Alabama, but you still need to have a legitimate shot at the college football playoffs. You don't know what that is anymore, because we don't know what Clemson is yet. I'm not entirely convinced that Louisville's as awful as hanging around with Purdue. I'm not. They still have the Heisman Trophy winner. I am convinced that Dave Doran is a terrible head coach, and I've been convinced of that for a long time. And letting Will Muschamp's offense score 35 points only, I guess, heightens that up. But even then, we don't know exactly what NC State's going to be. We're here in week 1 of the college football season, and about the only thing we know is that Florida State's defense held toe-to-toe with the number 1 team in the country, and that they're now without their starting quarterback, the most important player on a Jimbo Fisher coach team. So what does the future hold? I wish I could tell you. I really do. But for now, just buckle up, have fun with a season that maybe doesn't have the expectations that you thought it was going to be, but let that be a little freeing as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the toughest part is not only for months, but for 55 minutes of this football game, you were thinking to yourself, no matter what happens, you liked what you saw, and you felt really good about this team's chances being able to run the table regardless of how that game shook out. And in a split second, that was all taken from you. And now everything you've heard from months and everything, it's now in question because, like you said, we don't really know what James Blackman is or what he's going to bring to the table. He's a true freshman, and you have to recalculate your expectations. And it's sad because you only get so many teams that are this good. And this team is so good. And I think watching that Alabama game was what really made me feel like that. Is like you said, we were toe-to-toe with them. We got dragged in special teams, obviously. We don't really need to say that. But offense, defense, toe-to-toe with them. And that's the best team in college football. Everybody knows that. So you're as good as advertised. And to see Francois start 9 of 11 for 98 yards and then finish 9 or 10 of 22 for 112 and 2 picks and then get hurt. It's a tough way for that game to end. It's a tough way for your season's outlook. But like you said, all you can do now is release those expectations that you had and just kind of enjoy another college football season.
And I think what's curious about this becomes a season that I know you're losing a lot on defense at the end of the year more than likely. And that defense has to go through somewhat of a rebuilding process in 2018. But take a look at it this way. For the future of the program, this becomes an important measuring stick for the 3 guys that now have the biggest questions. Rick Trickett, Charles Kelly, and Jay Graham, of course, being added to that equation fully on Saturday. Charles Kelly and Rick Trickett's units lived up to their hype, and they lived up to what you hoped that they could be on Saturday. Jay Graham's didn't. But you know what? That could change within the course of a season. And I say that because you need an offensive line that can give your freshman quarterback time to win. You need a defense that can put an offense that maybe isn't as good as you thought it was going to be to win games. And when you have an offense that's maybe not as good as you thought it was going to be, you need a place kicker to win you ball games. All 3 of those units are going to be under intense scrutiny, maybe even more than we thought for the next 12 weeks, and it's going to be an interesting something to look at. That being said, we got to get you caught up on the college football action. How awesome is that happened last night? Ladies and gentlemen, this is Why You Were Sleeping.
Hello. Good morning.
Wake up! Wake up! Wake me up! Good morning. Good morning.
What happened last night?
We start on the West Coast where, can we just fire Jim Mora and Kevin Sumlin already and get it over with? 34 points. That's the deficit for the UCLA Bruins in the third quarter of their football game. And then Josh Rosen shows why he's probably going to be the number 1 pick in the draft next year. 35 of 59. That number's all right. 491 yards. That number's awesome. And 4 touchdowns. That'll be enough for the Bruins to defeat the Texas A&M Aggies 45-44 in the Rose Bowl. Worth noting that this same thing happened at Kyle Field last year. A&M just didn't come all the way back. But the comeback's complete. I said it on Twitter last night. I'll say it again here. I would say this is the most Kevin Sumlin loss ever, except it's not November. So, gosh, he might be the first to go, right? He might be the first to get tossed this season. Him or Dave Dorn, because what happened Saturday is inexcusable too. But my God, man. How do you go from at one point being the highest paid coach in the country to that? Also, another good game, West Virginia 24, Virginia Tech 31. Justin Fuente, in his second year, gets a W. Will Greer looked a little shaky in the beginning of this game for the Ears, but then he pulls it off. He's 31 of 53, 371 yards, 3 touches, and a pick. When we come back, Gene Williams' interview with Jimbo Fisher on Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio. And as we get to do during football season,
Every week after a game, we get to talk to Coach Fisher. We tape this Sunday night, and we air this in the morning, obviously, on the broadcast. And, Coach, I appreciate taking some time. I know you had a real late night last night and another late night when we're taping this on Sunday, so let me jump into this right away. And I guess the one thing, and I know you're very much adamant about game at a time and not making too much out of a single game, but obviously, you know, your kids are going to read social media, they're going to listen to ESPN, and obviously made a big deal out of this game the other night. How do you kind of get your kids back on level and realize all your goals are still in front of you?
Oh, you tell them, and they know that, you know, Alabama's a very good football team, but we are too, and it was some self-inflicted wounds, but you give Alabama credit. It's not like we gave it to them. I don't mean that. They made the plays when they had to make plays and things that are very, very correctable and things that we've worked on very hard, and we've got to, you know, dot some I's and clean it up and then put it right in front of them and let them go play. They know when they walked off that field that we're a good football team. They really did, and we've addressed that in the locker room, and they still feel that way. Now, just a matter of going out and cleaning up some things and you know, making a few more plays.
Now, I'm not going to ask you about Deondre Francois' status because I know you're going to address that during your press conference, which will be at 1 o'clock later today. But let me ask you a little bit about if James Blackman has to go out there, what do you expect from him, and what have you seen out of him so far?
Well, no, James done a good job in camp. He's been very productive. He's earned the job at where he was at. But the other two guys are still very good too. But you know, James is in the scrimmages has performed very well. He's made big plays. He played with consistency. He's driven the ball with the two offense against the one defense, and played in that environment there in all those scrimmages and did very well. Does very well in the day-to-day practice stuff and has learned well. So you know, if that's the case in which we go with, then that'll be. You know, we'll package some things for him that he does well, and we'll game plan and go.
Now, Coach, a real positive sign that at least I saw from the other night was how your defense played. And I went back and looked, and after that, those first three series, for the rest of the game, you held Alabama to 2.1 yards per play. Just talk about a little bit of that performance of those guys.
Well, I think they were great up front. They took on blockers well, sealed gaps, fit their gaps well, contained the ball very well. Even when the quarterback bounced, the next guy would leverage the football. I thought they did a great job in that. They covered well. I mean, they played the quarterback runs. They get a few plays here and there, but I thought overall they did a really nice job with the physicality and then also the versatility and the nickel and dime packages and all the things we had and contested throws. And Alabama's a very good team, but they were outstanding in the game, especially like after the first couple of series, like you said, kept us in the game and had some opportunities that kept us alive. And I was very proud of the way our defense.
Now, you had that one breakdown on the third series, and that was, I'm just guessing you didn't get safety help there that was supposed to be there?
Yeah, safety rotation. They got confused in a safety rotation, which motion can happen sometimes. Which guy was going back, which guy was coming up, and and Alabama had the right play called at the right time and took advantage of it. And it's one little breakdown, but it's a big one because it was 6 points. But at the same time, it's something that we deal with, and we fix the rest of the game because after that we got it fixed, and they got it right.
Let's go back. I know you got a chance to look at the film and the running game. Not a whole lot of running success on Saturday night. But then again, I know Alabama's number one last year against the run, too. Not an easy team to run against. Anything you saw on film that stuck out?
Well, really, when you ran the ball, we ran the ball at times well, but what we didn't go early in the game, we wanted to play action and create some mismatches, which we did. We moved the ball extremely. The first drive, we moved down there. We had 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, and we had the guy in the flat wide open, and we just missed him. And then we had another one. The next play, we had it on the corner, and we just didn't get it thrown. And then we moved the ball well again. Had a 3 and out. The 3 and out we had was one of the frustrating. They tipped 2 balls that we had guys we felt were going to make had really nice plays. And then we drove the next drive and moved down there, moved it up there. Then we had the 2-minute drive, so we felt very good. First drive of the second half, we moved the ball. And we mixed some run. It's enough. As the game went on, we wanted to pound. You can't go into Alabama, I think, early and just say you're going to line up and knock them off the ball. They played at that, but then once you loosen them up, you can't. We felt like we could do enough run to keep them honest, and we were starting to do that. Then we just fell behind and lost tempo of the game. But a running game, I know the numbers weren't great, but there's some real positives in there, and we still feel like we can run the football.
Coach, along those lines, the offensive line, it looked to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it looked like they actually blocked pretty well, but then it seemed like Alabama threw some blitz packages at you in the second half that it kind of gave you guys some trouble.
No, it wasn't offensive line. Offensive line did a great job. Offensive line had only 2 hits of them, and that was on a twist game that they come off of, and they didn't need to stay. They need to stay on to a little different ways that came off. The other couple, we missed a couple hot routes the receivers need to break off that just normal hots when you blitz that we do from day one that everybody in the country does, and we missed a couple of those and a couple that Deondre needed to get out. There was one or two that he needed to get out, but the offensive line for the most part, I mean, they had that one pressure they got up the middle, but Raekwon got a sack on. He just beat a guy one-on-one, but for the most part, our guys really give us time to throw the football. They did a nice job in the run game. I thought played a really, really standard. They weren't perfect by no means, but I'm going to tell you, I thought they played really well.
And last thing, 'cause I know you got to get going, Coach, I definitely got to ask you about special teams, something you worked so hard on the offseason. First, let me just ask about the breakdown on the punt block. Was that just something, I mean, when you went back and looked at film, what happened on that play?
It was nothing but split.
Yeah.
It was nothing but a split. I mean, we were too wide on our alignment, and they had too big a gap, and something like they punt the thing you do from day one. And we work on it extensively, anywhere from 8 to 12 minutes a day, every day, at least. And done a lot of work and just got it wide. The guy got split too wide. They shot it, and was there to make it, and cost it. We just got, at the end of the day, that's what it was. It wasn't an assignment. It was a split. And got the gap, and it was that simple. I know that sounds crazy, but that's exactly what happened.
Now, any changes you might make on special teams or anything you'll mix up this week, or are you just going to kind of work on correcting the mistakes?
Well, we may make personnel changes in certain areas and different guys that we get them back, or guys that keep growing. But we'll look at it. We got to first of all clean up the fundamentals. We had to, like I said, with the field goal and the other, but we got to make a better decision on the other things. That was we worked special teams extremely hard, and like I say, sometimes we've been some of the best in the country, and disappointing that we got that. But that's the head coach. I got to do a better job of getting us in a better position to do that, and work on it even more. We'll fundamentally break it down, make sure we understand everything, and go and make the adjustments. All right, Coach, I appreciate it. I know your time is very valuable. We appreciate you taking some time to spend with us, and we'll talk to you at 1 o'clock coming up for the new press conference. But thanks for joining us. And thank you, Gene. I appreciate it, buddy. It's always good to be with you, buddy. You too. All right, bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Yes, Florida State just landed a 5-star commitment.
I don't see that anywhere online. How did you get that news so fast?
I'm on the new warchant.com app. I get news updates and scores pushed to my phone instantly.
How much does it cost?
It's free. Just go to iTunes or the Google Play Store, type in Warchant, and install it on your phone. That's it.
A free app that keeps me constantly up to date on Florida State sports and recruiting? Wow, that makes it incredibly easy to follow my Seminoles and never miss out.
With the app, you'll also get quick access to all the stories and features on Warchant, including the ever-popular message boards that feature thousands of fans talking about the Noles.
Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
Oh, yeah, you're going to have to make something out of nothing if you're the Florida State Seminoles. This Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio. I shouldn't say nothing because you do have a rather talented true freshman, but true freshman, Jimbo Fisher offense, true freshman Florida State in general hasn't started a game at FSU since the mid-'80s, and we're going to see what it's like to roll with James Blackman here on Wake Up War Chant, brought to you by your friends at For the Table. I thought better than just about anybody to help us break this down would be Mr. Michael Langston, of course, senior recruiting analyst of warchant.com. Talk a little bit about James Blackman and what he can bring to the table. Michael's joining us via the phone lines. Mr. Langston, how are you, sir?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm curious more than anything. I think this week went from being maybe the most snooze-induced week on Florida State's schedule to one of the most instantly fascinating home openers Florida State's had in a very, very long time, especially one with an opponent the caliber of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be exciting, and it's never happened before, as you mentioned in the intro about having a true freshman play quarterback. But it's going to be exciting. It's going to be interesting to see how it's utilized. But if anybody knows how to utilize a quarterback the best way, it's certainly Jimbo, who has a strong history of that, and I'm sure he knows what ways and what things that James is, he's comfortable with James doing. So it's going to be fun, but it's going to be also interesting.
So let's just start with it this way. James Blackman was a guy who originally, when he got brought in, was a project. He certainly seemed to be a guy, mostly from, if memory serves me correctly, camp is more than anything what impressed Jimbo Fisher about James Blackman. He came into his Jimbo Fisher camps, looked really good there, and that's where FSU extended the offer. Does my memory serve me right?
Yeah, the offer, that is correct. I mean, he started off as a 3-star, and then he got bumped up to a 4-star. And he's a guy that they had been recruiting for 2 years, and they wanted to see him throw, and he just blew Jimbo's socks off when he watched him throw the ball. He can really sling it, and that really just jumped out in Jimbo in that camp. And as soon as that camp, I mean, it wasn't even over. It was like right after that throwing session, Jimbo immediately offered him, and then he committed later. So I think, seeing what they run, they basically run, for people that don't know, when they do the camps, they're basically running the base system of what FSU does. So he ran all that stuff, made every throw. He made all the throws you want in every possible angle, and really just made a big impression. And even somebody that's told me that, is close to the program told me that was one of the most impressive, sessions as far as throwing that Jimbo's had for a quarterback there, and that says a lot. But I think it says a lot about his, throwing ability and all that stuff.
So in high school, are you privy to what type of system James Blackman ran?
Yeah, they kind of ran not a pro style, but it's kind of like a wide open run and shoot type stuff. Sometimes they run read options, sometimes they run, pass. They pass more than they ran, but he was such a good athlete that they like. I mean, the one thing about James I can say that'll probably surprise some people is that he runs pretty well. He's very athletic, and he could certainly take off and get a lot of yards, and he's got a good speed for a guy that big or that tall. And he's certainly very athletic, and that's the thing that'll jump out at people. Obviously, he's very skinny, as people have seen, but he can run. And but his best attribute that really caught FSU's attention, his ability to throw. People will notice that when they watch him. He is mechanically ahead of a lot of high school seniors you see, because his technique is really good. Mechanics are pretty good. Obviously, he holds the ball a little bit too low coming out of high school, but I'm sure FSU's already cleaned that up some. So that's the things that jumped out at me as a high school. When you watch him in high school, didn't throw as much, but when he did, when he had time, and he played on a team that wasn't that great, so he had to improvise a lot of times, and things happen, and he had to improvise and make plays, and sometimes that happened to mistakes and turnovers, but he's a guy that is very dynamic.
Overall, Michael, he was seen more as the project guy. I already stated that. And Bailey Hockman was seen more as the more polished, ready-to-go guy, of course, out of North Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
James Blackman seems to be the one that has the better camp, kind of pulls away. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that the guy who a lot of people thought maybe it would take a year or two for him to click, he just kind of clicked right away in that offense?
Well, I think a lot of it is just, as he mentioned, the throwing ability, and that's not to say anything about Bailey. And two, I think what people saw is James really didn't have a chance to really show what he can do when he's surrounded by elite talent. Like, Bailey was on one of the best teams in Georgia in McEachern. He had one of the best teams. He was a game manager. He did a really good job with that. James was on a team where he was the best player on the team, and he had to do a lot of things and force a lot of things and make things happen. So when you surround him with elite talent like you have at FSU, and what I've always said about James is he has the highest skill set out of the two, because there's so many things that he can do, and the way he can throw the ball and the way he can read defenses is pretty well. And, his ability just to make every throw, and certainly his height is a plus for, at playing at the next level. When you can see over the line and you can see things over what's happening, that's an advantage for, a taller quarterback. And that's one thing he will have over Francois that kind of hurts Deondre sometimes, and sometimes why Deondre has to wait on routes is because he can't see over everything. With James, you're not going to have that, but obviously with Deondre, he was so well adapted with that system and been in there for so long and all that stuff. But with James, you're concerned with the mistakes and the freshman mistakes you see. So that's kind of the breakdown of why you saw, James emerge quicker than Bailey.
Overall, what do you think realistic expectations are for him in control of this offense? Of course, we've never seen at Florida State a true freshman in charge of a Jimbo Fisher offense.
Yeah, I think with the way Jimbo does, I mean, I think, this is my opinion, I think he'll slowly bring him along in stuff that he's comfortable with, that they've seen in practice and they've run in scrimmages. And, I've heard a bunch of positive things on when he's out there in the scrimmages and he's gone against the first-team defense, which I think everyone saw how good that first-team defense is for FSU. So, that's encouraging. But I think what they'll do is they'll get him in comfort zones of stuff that he feels comfortable with, and also not put him in positions where, he could take too many shots or to possibly get an injury or something like that. I think they'll do stuff that he's comfortable with. And then, as he did with Deondre, when Deondre was a freshman, I think you'll slowly see him give him more and more of the offense, of more things they can do with him. But I think at first it'll be simplified and just getting him familiar and getting him comfortable and getting into a groove and a rhythm. And then once you see that, I think he'll open up a little more.
I chatted with Drew a little bit about this in the show, and it's just the idea that's got to be frustrating for Jimbo Fisher, as much as he likes the guy, that this was the first time since 2014 that Jimbo Fisher was slated to have a second-year quarterback who is more comfortable in his offense, which we all know can be very, very complicated, and runs through that quarterback. If you're the head coach of the Florida State Seminoles right now, that more than anything has to frustrate you.
Yeah, it has to be, because you finally got a guy that's experienced in there and running your system, and pretty much, since Jameis, you've pretty much given him majority of everything, that you can trust him with, and now you're kind of back to square one where you're having to bring a guy along again and get him comfortable. But Jimbo is very adept with this situation of how much to give a guy, what a guy can do, and the limitations. He doesn't just throw a guy out there. He puts them in. He's very good at putting the limitations on what his quarterbacks can do, and he'll get James into comfortable situations. But here's the other thing, what we'll find out this week is, we pretty much know who the receivers are, the first three, which sounds like Gavin, Nooney Murray, and Tate seem to be the top three guys. But now we're going to find out who the other guys that are 4, 5, and 6, and we'll also find out what the rotation is going to be at running back. So he's going to have a lot of guys around him. I'm sure they're going to highlight that, hey, take advantage of this stuff. And two, you want to see, sometimes Deondre kind of holds the ball a little bit too long. So I think you'll see more checkdowns and stuff like that where, let your playmakers make plays. Yeah, I mean, there's talent. There's so much talent on this team with 5-star guys at skill positions that I'm sure Jimbo's going to highlight that to James and say, hey, you just have to run the ship and just get your playmakers the ball. And you can also do your dynamic play. We're going to do that every year, sometimes what you're comfortable with, but I think that's kind of going to be the game plan is like, utilize your skills, but utilize your talent around you.
Michael, while I have you on the phone, a couple non-Blackman related questions. We'll start with, another freshman who made his debut against the Alabama Crimson Tide, Cam Akers. And my goodness, you didn't see a ton of him, but when he got the ball in his hands, that's a true freshman who at times made arguably the best defense that college football has had for literally a solid decade look foolish. That juke, did you ever think that if that kid played against Alabama, he would have a juke like that?
Yeah, he's pretty special, and there's a reason he was the number one ranked running back in the country. And I just think it's a matter of time. And it might be this weekend. He's the featured starter. But I think a lot of the backs we haven't even seen, like Amir Rasul, who we've heard a lot of great things about. Obviously, Laybourne, we've heard a lot of positive things about him. And then, and Patrick, and there's going to be games where you use different guys, but just when you watch, and this is nothing against Jacquez, but when you watch Cam, it's just a different feel when you watch him run the ball. I mean, you just hold your breath because you think he's going to take it. I mean, he's going to make a big play. Not he's going to take it all the way, but he's going to make a big play. You just feel that big play capability, every time he touches the ball. I mean, when he got out there in the screen, you're like, whoa, it's like you're waiting for something big to happen.
Now for a question, Michael, that kind of involves Deondre, Francois, and James Blackman. let's say Deondre Francois gets himself a medical red shirt and he comes back for another year, maybe even decides to stay a year after that. I'm not trying to trivialize Deondre Francois' injury. It really does stink for him, but I know the last time that we chit-chatted, you talked about the situation with Justin Fields, what's going on at Georgia, and now that Florida State might have a quarterback with another year, what do you think his mindset is?
Well, I think, the other side of it is, Jacob Eason got banged up this weekend, and then Jake Fromm came in there for Georgia. He's a freshman. And I think most Georgia fans, your Georgia people I've talked to, felt like Fromm was going to eventually take that job from Jacob Eason. So that throws in another dynamic where, if Fromm's the quarterback, if he's the guy, he's a freshman.
He's going to be the guy for 3 years.
Yeah, so who knows how big an impact that's going to be. I don't think. I mean, at the end of the day, I think Justin. If Justin has to sit out a year or whatever, then he'll do that. But I think it has a little impact on both situations. But I don't think it's ultimately going to be a reason why he chooses one school or the other.
Finally, my friend, we actually got a question for you for the mailbag about a week or two ago. We just never really got a chance to chit-chat because we've been so busy over the weeks. But Mike, who emailed radio@warchant.com, wants to know, who do you think in this next class can be the next quote-unquote dog on defense? The freshman that could make a huge impact on day one, the freakish athlete in the secondary, anything like that. So I guess the big question is, of the freshmen from this class and this next class, who do you think are the guys who can have the biggest impact throughout the season early on?
Would it be 17 class or would it be 18 class?
Let's do one from both. Why not?
Okay, well, the 17 class is pretty easy for me because I think Hampson Azardine is going to be the stud. I mean, that kid's going to be starting at some point. I mean, in my opinion, that kid is a freak and he's big, he's rangy, and we saw a little bit of excitement from him. We watched him against Alabama. I think that kid, everyone's going to love that kid. I think Marvin will be a guy that gets into the rotation. You'll hear more about Marvin Wilson as the season goes on. But I think Hampson Azardine is a name that everyone's going to, definitely, going to love, as far as in that defense, and certainly is just a great fit overall based on, the different things that he can do and, the exciting part of his game as far as he just jumps right out at you. And then 18 class is kind of early for that because they're just starting recruiting and stuff. But I'd say cornerback, I really like the A.J. Litton kid from Maryland. He's a guy that really stands out to me. I think he's the guy that could come in there and make a significant splash, not starting or anything, but I think he's a guy that could see the field a lot.
Michael, thanks as always, my friend. Always appreciate it.
You got it, man.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're putting a bow on this thing right after this. It's Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio. All right, folks, we're done. Thanks to Coach, thanks to Michael Langston, thanks to Drew, and thanks to you for listening. Mike and Mike's up next, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.
Hey, thanks for downloading today's show. If you haven't already, why don't you rate and subscribe us? We certainly do appreciate it, and of course, we appreciate you listening anyway, so just go ahead and click that right there. You know you want to. Come on. Come on. Thanks again for letting us do the show. We love giving you all the football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, all year round. Not just football season, not just spring practice, but hopefully giving you the freshest and newest FSU content every day. Thanks, guys.